Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It is now 5:07. It's O'Connor and Company on this Wednesday morning. I'm told, Julie Gunlock, that they call this Hump Day. I'm not sure what to make of that.
They do. I don't either.
It's a camel reference, I'm told. But
I think it means you're the hump of the week. Like you've...
Yeah, well, yeah, I suppose. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas. It feels like a hump, doesn't it? It feels like, okay, just get over that. Why is it so beautiful out, and then the second you step outside, it feels like you live in the Yukon territories of Canada?
No.
It felt sub-zero overnight. This is not supposed to happen in the first week of April. 6:35, Cal Thomas will join us. At 7:05, Daniel Turner would like to power the future. Talk about Donald Trump's executive actions yesterday on energy in America. 8:05, Susan Ferriccio at the Washington Times. And then at 8:35, Luke Rosiak of the Daily Wire. He's been pursuing some abuses in Social Security. We're going to follow up on that. Yesterday, the IRS said that they were going to share tax information with the Department of Homeland Security to help facilitate the deportation of illegal immigrants. And it was in only that moment when this was reported to the MSNBC audience as something horrible and terrible, that the MSNBC audience actually learned confirmation and validation that illegal immigrants had been handed out tax ID numbers in the first place. No, they denied that forever. Oh, they're illegal immigrants. They're not working when they shouldn't be working illegally. It's like, oh well, it does turn out that Obama started handing out tax ID numbers to these people. They could, if you give your information to the government and you've committed a crime, it's funny how these agencies share that information to catch you. Oh, there's so much to talk about. That said, I do want to start with the First Amendment. Freedom of the press is important. I write about this in my book. Have you heard about the book that I wrote? I haven't mentioned it much. I should mention it more.
You really should, actually. You don't mention it.
I know. I've listened to some of my talk radio colleagues after they've written a book, and you'd think that the entire month has become a book tour. I've actually been quite reserved, but when it is appropriate, and it is in this case, I wrote a book about the media and about the press, specifically about how the press covered the 2024 presidential election. It's called Shameless Liars, and I go through all of the lies, not just the lies they said about Trump and Vance, which were obvious, but the lies of omission in not covering the reality of Joe Biden's debilitating decline, and the lies they said about those of us who pointed out Joe Biden's debilitating decline. But the beginning of the book really is sort of a reset about what the press is supposed to be, what the press always was before it got taken over and used as a weapon for the political left. And the original vision for the First Amendment. The First Amendment is not about protecting Jim Acosta's right to behave like an ass at a White House press briefing. The First Amendment, you think Madison and Hamilton said, oh, hold on, before we put this whole First Amendment to bed, before we settle this whole thing about freedom of speech, we better carve out something to protect a reporter. The freedom
acts like a clown. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, let's make sure that a corporation that owns, a theme park can also be protected from any lawsuits so that they can lie on television.
Yeah.
No, I promise you, Hamilton and Madison did not dream up the freedom of the press for the First Amendment so eventually Disney and George Stephanopoulos could get off scot-free for being propagandists. That's not what the freedom of the press is for. Every single freedom articulated in the First Amendment is about us. It's about the voters. It's about the citizens. The reason we have freedom of the press in the First Amendment and enshrined in the First Amendment and to tell the government that they can't infringe on freedom of the press is to protect the citizens so that we can have a free flow of information and we can be informed citizens. We can be informed voters. Our founders knew that the only way this constitutional experiment was going to work, and it seems to have worked for about 250 years now, is if we got unfettered and unrestricted access to information about our government. Now, you fast forward to 2025, and some federal judge agrees with the Associated Press on some ridiculous, outrageous, warped vision of what freedom of the press means. The federal court yesterday just awarded the Associated Press a preliminary victory in their lawsuit against the Trump White House, where they are demanding to be in the Oval Office and on Air Force One. Otherwise, freedom of the press is infringed.
This is insane.
It is absolutely insane.
But at this point, we had a federal judge literally want to turn a plane around with dangerous gang members, which would have endangered American citizens. Are we really surprised that a federal judge is doing this? No, of course not. But go on, explain what happened.
Well, according to the judge, this would be Trevor McFadden. I've always been suspicious of people named Trevor.
You know, that was on our list for our boys. I love the name Trevor.
Was it? See, I had a situation with a kid in second grade named Trevor, and I've never been able to shake it.
Oh dear,
Trevor. Under the First Amendment, if the government opens its doors to some journalists, be it the Oval Office, the East Room, or elsewhere, it cannot then shut those doors to other journalists because of their viewpoints. The Constitution requires no less. Okay, so, I mean, does that mean the propaganda wing of the Communist Party in Beijing has a right to be in the Oval Office?
Yeah, I mean, this is like Jill. I remember when Jill Biden said all books should be in the library, in children's, all books, all.
Right,
well,
right.
I mean, it's sort of impossible, right? Okay, so the White House can't make any judgments, just like you said, like propaganda outlets from Communist China, those should be let in. Like they can't. They have no judgment at all. They're not allowed to use judgment at all. I mean, this is insane. Anybody who knocks, hey, I'm a journalist. Hey, Larry, we should be let in. Let's use this to our advantage.
Well, by the way, let's not forget that when Jen Psaki took over the White House Communications Department, when Joe Biden was enshrined as president after the 2020 election, she canceled the press passes for over 400 journalists who had access to the White House. And by the way, let's not forget that the Associated Press does have access. Last I checked,
yes, they do. Exactly.
February 21st, the AP has done a fine job reporting on the president.
Exactly.
They have access to the briefing room. What they don't have access to is when the small pool of reporters from the White House pool gets limited access. Only a small handful of reporters get access to the Oval Office.
Someone is always left out of that pool.
That's right. And what this judge says is, oh, sure, but you can't leave the AP out because you don't like the way they report.
Right.
That's the narrow aspect of this report. Or the Air Force One, for that matter. You know, a very small handful of reporters are allowed on to Air Force One. The White House has decided that they don't want to give that privilege to the Associated Press. This judge says, oh, no, if you give it for other reporters, you have to give it to the Associated Press. So now the White House is faced with two choices. Either you acquiesce and you allow the Associated Press into these small limited pools in the Oval Office or on Air Force One, or the other option, which I'll share with you in a moment, I think is the way the White House should go, which is, okay, so if I have to let reporters in, then that means I have to allow the AP in, or alternatively, I won't let any reporters in.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's probably what they're going to do.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that.
Well, let's discuss it in a moment, though, because I don't know about you, but I'm watching our clock this morning, and it's 5:15.
Larry.
WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First
starting early this morning.
Well, if you know what time it is and you can tell I'm reaching a conclusion.
I could tell. We're going to fight. It's going to be a day. It's going to be a day.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Sean Spicer, friend of this program and former White House press secretary, says that the White House should appeal it. And by the way, the judge has not given a timeline to implement this. He's given the White House a week to appeal it. They will appeal it. Sean Spicer points out the same First Amendment that grants the freedom of press also enshrines the freedom of association. Doesn't Trump have a right to decide who enters his office or who gets on his plane? Now, some would argue, well, it's not his office. It's a government building. It's the people's house, and so they should be able to, demand. Take this to its logical conclusion. Clay Travis, who runs Outkick, which is a sports reporting entity, he says, so I can sue any sports league or any team that declines credentials to us. Under this logic, the court would mandate the teams or leagues credential us. It's an insane ruling. So yeah, a sports league. The NBA has to grant a credential to anyone who applies. They're not allowed to use any discerning qualifications about who gets into the post-game press conference for the Washington Wizards or the Washington Capitals. It makes no sense. Of course you're allowed to use some discretion on who gets in. And I wouldn't be surprised if the White House says, okay, fine, that means no more reporters.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, again, they're going to have to appeal this. This is, again, a federal judge who's clearly an activist, disregarding the law and frankly, common sense. I mean, anybody who looks at this, you just laid out, and Clay Travis just laid out why this is such a bad ruling. This actually opens up this Pandora's box of possible lawsuits to places that don't allow, certain media in because they're using their own judgment. They're discerning who they want in that audience, in that pool of reporters. This is an insane ruling. It'll be appealed, and I think eventually the Trump administration will win.
Well, I don't know. It has to go to the Supreme Court, and who knows what Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett will decide. But I had suggested that the Trump administration will just say, okay, so if I let any reporters into the Oval Office, I have to let all of them in. Then we're not going to let any of them into the Oval Office. And you suggested maybe they won't do that. Why
well,
not?
I think honestly that those press avails with Trump in the Oval Office, whether he's signing executive orders or just talking to the press, are just so good. They're good for him. Americans like it. He comes off as affable and relatable, and so I don't know if they'll decide to cancel them altogether. I just think it's been a really good tool that Trump has, and so I would hate to see them canceled. You could be right, but I would hate to see them canceled because, again, I think it's good for Trump.
Yeah, well, it's also good for all those media organizations. Listen, the AP is not doing this because let me reset here for a second. I started this entire discussion framed around the idea of who is the First Amendment supposed to serve? What is the purpose of the freedom of the press? The judge does not have you, the American citizen, you, the voter, in mind in making this decision. The judge is saying, well, this isn't fair to the Associated Press. Well, why is it so important to the Associated Press to be on the plane and to be in the Oval Office? Well, because it grants them this level and aura of exclusivity and importance that gives value to their brand, right? Which means that this makes them important. It's about what they want and how they want to deliver. If the White House says, okay, well, because the AP threw this temper tantrum and has warped the idea of what the First Amendment and the freedom of the press is supposed to be about, they won in court, but that means you're all going to be punished. And none of you reporters get this. Watch how quickly they turn. Watch how quickly ABC and CBS and CNN turn to AP and say, yeah, you screwed it up for all of us now.
Yeah.
And so none of them get in. Or you go back to the Biden days where it's like, okay, you're allowed to be in the Oval Office, but he's not going to answer any questions. You're going to come in, he's going to sit there, you're going to take pictures, and then he's going to usher you out. Is that what you want? Because what's next, Julie? Okay, all the reporters get in here. AP gets to be in. Trump will answer everybody's questions, but will not answer a question from AP. AP asks a question, and he's going to say, nope, you're AP. I'm not going to answer your question. Are they going to sue over that? Is a judge going to demand that the president has to answer every question from the AP? This is ridiculous, and it makes absolutely no sense.
You're right. Well, and that's a very good argument for canceling them altogether. It really is. It just don't
and
deal
see
with
how
these
long
people.
it lasts.
Yeah.
We'll see what the next step is. Like I said, the judge has given about a week for the appeals process, and you should expect one. and then it'll be in the hands of the Supreme Court. In the meantime, a Pyrrhic and temporary victory for the Associated Press and reporters everywhere. Jim Acosta slept very well last night in his unemployed status. It's 5:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36. It's O'Connor and Company this Wednesday morning in the nation's capital. Let's plow through the news cycle like that dude who eats all those hot dogs on 4th of July. Joey Chestnut.
There you go.
Michael Sheldon was just leaning forward to say Joey Chestnut in my ear. You could tell. You could see. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. Pop culture reference? I got you. I have it. I know Joey Chestnut. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas will join us. 7:05, Daniel Turner, Power of the Future on Trump's executive actions on energy. 8:05, Susan Ferriccio, Washington Times, a Looney Tunes story about the attempted assassin of Donald Trump, the second guy who was caught on the golf course. Apparently he was trying to get like military-grade weapons from Ukrainian military. And the big question is, did the Ukrainian military report this to the Biden administration? Did the Ukrainian government report back to the Biden administration that an American citizen was trying to acquire military weapons to assassinate Donald Trump? I would love to know if the Ukrainian military ever reported this story. If they didn't report it, that's a scandal. If they did report it and the Biden administration did nothing about it, that's a bigger scandal.
Yes.
So we'll talk to Susan Ferriccio about that. 8:35, Luke Rosiak from Daily Wire. That's Julie Gunlock. I'm Larry O'Connor. We've got some trans news. Would you like some trans news?
Sure, why not?
Well, we keep hearing that executive action that Donald Trump signed, banning school systems and government entities from putting biological men into sporting competitions with women, that was unnecessary. It was mean-spirited. It lacked... And it never happens. And guess what? We've got another story where that thing that never happens, in fact, happened. Now, this did happen prior to the executive order, but the ripple effect continues. What happened was a women's varsity high school basketball team had made it into the state playoffs in Vermont. This is a Christian high school, a private Christian high school, which last I checked, you're still allowed to have in this country, even in Vermont. The women's team in February of 2023 saw that in the playoffs they were going to face a team that had a 6-foot-tall biological male, who, by the way, you know, when you get into the playoffs, you can start scouting who your other teams are. You check out how they play and what they, start putting your game plan together. And the coach of these young teenage girls in a Christian high school saw that this 6-foot-tall dude was known for his aggressive play. Listen, I played basketball in high school. I was actually kind of a tough guy because I couldn't shoot. If you can't make any baskets, then you're in charge of getting down there, blocking out, getting the rebound, and then passing the ball to the guy who can shoot.
Yes.
That was my job. And you have to play tough. You get down there in the trenches, under the boards, you play in the boards, you throw some elbows around, you square off, you set your... Trust me, if I was playing against a bunch of teenage girls, I would have done a lot better.
Yes.
The coaches saw some game tape, and said, we're not going to do this. Number one, well, actually, I was about to do this in the wrong order. Let me do this properly. Number one, this violates our religious beliefs that God created man and woman separately, and there's just two genders. And we're a Christian school, and this violates our faith. It violates our ability to exercise our faith. Number two, it's going to endanger our girls.
Yes, and there is video of in another school of girls playing against a boy and a girl being knocked to the ground and several girls being injured during the game. Right. So I mean, I'm just pointing that out. The whole it never happens, because that's what they would say is, oh, right. Well, this guy isn't going to hurt you. We
so
know
they forfeited.
Yep.
They forfeited, and everybody might be thinking, okay, well, Vermont school system decided they were going to put a dude on the team, and that's their right, I guess, as a government entity. And the girls' team decided to forfeit. That's their right. Everyone is exercising their rights. Everyone should walk away. You would think in America that would be the case.
No, not enough.
No. Then the Vermont Principals Association decided to retaliate against this school, and they expelled the school from all sports statewide. So this school now is not allowed to compete in any sport across the state of Vermont as a retaliatory punishment because they were exercising their religious beliefs.
You will comply. That's right. Will. That is what Vermont told these girls. You will comply, and you'll put your life in danger, or you'll risk serious injury.
That's
Unbelievable.
Right. You are not allowed to exercise your religious faith when it comes to this. You're not allowed to protect the girls on your team from being attacked by a boy. Kristen Wagner, Alliance Defending Freedom, frequent guest and friend of this program, posted this story on X, and today they are going to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and they're going to argue this case in court. It may end up going to the Supreme Court, but it's where we are right now. And this is everyone who says, number one, this never happens, and number two, that it was spiteful and hurtful and there was no compassion or empathy in President Trump signing this executive order. You look at this case and you tell me where the compassion and the empathy is. You tell me whose rights and safety should be protected here. The Gavin Newsoms of the world, who love to play like they are reasonable about this, who told Charlie Kirk, well, yeah, this is an issue of fairness. Actually, it's not an issue of fairness. But he then emphasized with his flowing fingers and hand gestures that, you don't need to be mean about this. You need to show empathy and compassion.
And really quickly, I looked up a statement from Vermont Governor Phil Scott, who said about trans rights. He said that we have seen disturbing hostility towards the transgender community recently. Really? Hostility towards the transgender community? When you prevent these young women from even sitting it out, you right. are going to force them. If these girls want to keep playing, you're going to force them to face a biological male on the court. That's the hostility. That is where the hostility is.
And we've seen the physical injuries. We've interviewed Peyton McNabb, who has permanent brain damage because she took a volleyball to the face by a biological male. And obviously, in any reasonable person's eyes, she is a sympathetic figure and the victim of these policies. Unless you're John Oliver of HBO, who made
fun of her.
A major television segment mocking Peyton McNabb and downplaying any injury that this poor teenager suffered. We'll explain that to you coming up in just a moment. Right now, it's 5:44.
Mark Levin, weekdays 6 till 9 on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
John Oliver is a talentless, derivative, mean-spirited jerk. I'm only understating the case, actually. He's on HBO, and he does a show that is an obvious copycat of Jon Stewart's Daily Show. Yes. He used to be a performer on the Daily Show, actually, and then he basically copied the entire thing over on HBO and makes millions of dollars. I mean, what else do you call somebody other than a derivative, talentless hack who does something like that?
It's accurate.
He also has a team of writers, and I mean a team. These shows have like 25, 30 people who write this stuff for them, and they do one show a week. They're all on the extreme left. They make the Daily Show look like Fox News.
Yes.
And he has been a champion for transgender activism in America and deceptively and mean-spiritedly mocks anybody who suggests that perhaps, the 80% of us in this country who believe that this agenda and these protocols that have been forced down our throats are outrageous and unscientific and actually un-American. This week, he actually crossed a certain Rubicon that most people wouldn't. He made fun of a young girl, a teenage girl, you've heard her on this program, Peyton McNabb, who has permanent brain damage because she had to suffer an injury from a volleyball hitting her in the face.
Yes.
Peyton McNabb. And by the way, part of this has to do with a mini documentary produced by Independent Women's Forum. It was called Kill Shot. Kill Shot, by the way, my son plays volleyball. It's the term you use for a spike that ends a rally, that gives your team the point. It's called a kill shot because nobody can return it. That's what they call it, a kill shot. It ends the point, right? Yeah. Listen to John Oliver. This is cut 1. Let's go.
Well, first, in plenty of sports like track and swimming, there is no safety threat because they're not contact sports. But in others, like basketball and volleyball, there clearly is some amount of contact, either with another body or with a ball. But even there, the big anecdotes that get thrown around tend to be more complicated. The most famous example concerns Peyton McNabb, a three-sport high school athlete who was hit in the face by a spike during a volleyball match. She suffered injuries, including a concussion, and started speaking out against the policies that allowed the trans player who spiked the ball to play. The video of her getting hit often makes the rounds in these debates, and she told her story to the North Carolina state legislature before they implemented their ban. She also attended Trump's address to Congress and appeared in a video about the incident produced by an activist group for which she and Riley Gaines are now ambassadors.
A couple years ago, I was severely injured in a high school volleyball game by a male on the opposing team, leaving me with permanent injuries that the doctors don't know if I'll ever be able to recover from. Because of my career-ending injury, I was no longer able to perform the way I had in the past. Progressive gender ideology being pushed so harshly is exactly the root of why this was allowed to happen to me. If it wasn't pushed so harshly, this could have been 100% avoided.
Okay, I'll say this. Unlike holding up a trophy with a 6 on it for 40 seconds, a concussion is genuinely traumatic, though for what it's worth, she did go on to play softball in the spring and did pretty well, judging by her school posting this image about her making the all-conference team and a local paper pointing out she helped her team to a 5-0 start. And I'm not saying she wasn't injured or that it didn't have some impact on her performance, but a lot of the groups heavily pushing this story seem to be overselling it, including choosing to title that video Kill Shot, how Peyton McNabb turned tragedy into triumph, because Kill Shot is not a good title for a teenage girl who is very much alive and talking to a camera. Kill Shot is either a movie where Keanu Reeves and Ana de Armas, opposing spies and devastating marksmen, fall in love, or a hunting reality show that gets cancelled after its host, Donald Trump Jr., is mauled by a moose in heat.
Oh, my God.
It's funny how he prefaces, I'm not going to downplay or ridicule her injuries, and then goes on to downplay and ridicule her injuries.
Right. Now, Larry, you and I both met Peyton, and I always joke that on that big tour with all the athletes that have spoken out against this, you know, we're not supposed to pick favorites, but Peyton absolutely is my favorite. She's such a wonderful young woman. And my colleague, Victoria Coley, who has really been in charge of putting together most of these videos and sort of running this program where we do what's called storytelling, which are these sort of mini documentaries. Kelsey Bowler, who's a good friend of this,
and they're very effective.
This program.
Clearly, they're effective because it got
John
Oliver.
They got noticed. But Victoria Coley has this incredible thread explaining Peyton's severe long-term physical and mental health issues and how serious it was. And that video showing her getting spiked in the face, that was a kill shot with a volleyball, that spike was delivered by a male on the opposing team, as Peyton very, very articulately puts out there. The making fun of her for what she has gone through is so despicable of John Oliver, and attacking our organization as an activist, right-wing organization. It's interesting. And Victoria, again, I encourage everyone to follow her on Twitter and also look up this thread, Victoria Coley. She talks about how the fact checker for John Oliver's show is a male who dresses up as a woman. He's an activist, and he uses that show. And John Oliver's so stupid that he lets this activist on his staff use his show to further his positions on this. This activist named D.M. Brent, again, is a man who dresses up as he has several names. DM, Dave, Brent. He probably doesn't go by David anymore. He had a clear, as Victoria says, he had a clear objective, and it has been to push his agenda on John Oliver's show. This is despicable. It's disgusting. I don't know what else to say, because Peyton McNabb is truly a wonderful and very brave, outspoken woman.
Well, and your organization, who got singled out and targeted here, Independent Women's Forum, has done great work on this issue. You're representing women and women's interests. Victoria Coley put together a whole fact-based thread on this on X and got retweeted by J.K. Rowling, by the way, author of the Harry Potter series, who's also outspoken about this. So we're winning this fight. But John Oliver took this to a new level. And I don't think it's going to end well for him. I can't imagine that HBO and the corporate entity that owns it is happy with John Oliver attacking a young girl who has suffered injuries because of this and mocking her and making fun of it. Maybe so. And if that's the case, you know, spend your entertainment dollars wisely. HBO is probably not the wisest choice. It's 5:55 WMAL traffic and weather.